to take things that seem very sensible, very logical, very even static. This is the way we do this, right? This is why we do it. And because you are able to use those foundations and turn it into something, it actually is art. And yet in the midst of those, we see this beautiful creative process, which is the gospel, come out of students. It really empowers a lot of people.
That's right.
Which is what I feel like about this CI process is, right? It's meant, knowing thyself is meant for empowerment.
That's right.
Working with the local church to take the hope of Christ to every student in the United States. This is First Priority. Now here are your hosts, Steve Chirico and Brad Skelling.
Brad, welcome back to the podcast.
It's good to be here.
It is great to be here.
As always.
Man, we are just coming back from a pretty great meeting. You want to tell everybody about it?
Yeah, so by the time this comes out, it'll be 2 weeks probably from the day that we had a training down in Decatur, 27 people in the room. And it was just phenomenal to be in the room and meet the new hires in Kansas City. New guy in Tennessee 1, obviously.
We had Nashville, we had Virginia,
Central Virginia, Cincinnati,
we had Arklatex. Obviously the people from Decatur, North Alabama. It was
a lot of people from Decatur in the room.
Gosh, it was a great discussion. And happened quickly. I mean, only 8 hours of training and a few hours of cornhole, and we were gone.
You did notice that the people from Decatur only stuck around when Larry was talking.
I'm pretty used to that. It is Larry who we're talking about.
It's like, hey, just come listen to me.
Yeah, exactly. My name's Larry, and that's enough for you.
Oh, that's greatness. I love it.
So coming out of that,
yes.
What are we discussing today?
Well, one of the conversations that we have is the cultural index, because we profile everyone who comes in and wants to be on staff with First Priority of America. And we've profiled all of our directors, several coordinators on down the line, because we want to put the right people in the right seats. And if you've ever done profiling before, you know, with DISC or Myers-Briggs or Strength Finder, Enneagram, any of the profiling type situation, even a spiritual gifts test to an extent. It's a little bit different there, but just allows you to know who you are and, you know, what your preferred method of living life is. And so a lot of them have a lot of commonalities, like the people person or extrovert or introvert. You know, whether you're out there or not, whether you like those tasks or whether you like to be with people. High I or, you know, more the steady S personality stuff. The cultural index, we got that from one of our board members who also gave us traction. And they said, hey, we want you to be able to implement and gain traction with your ministry. You guys do a good job already, but let's get this whittled down so that you move forward. But in that, you need to make sure that, you know, the people you're putting into different positions like the position you're putting them in, and that you're not putting them in a place that they're not going to enjoy. And so it's a good conversation. And coming out of that training, we didn't go into that at the training. We'll probably add that to the trainings moving forward. But we wanted to have this conversation on the podcast to follow up with those in the room, and then with those who are hearing of this, because we often throw out CI or cultural index often, and we wanted you to be able to have that information.
Well, and you answered the question I was going to ask, which is really how we got to making a decision, because Enneagram's so hot, right?
Correct.
DISC has been the steady Eddie forever. Strengths has been the steady Eddie for the last 10 years, right? How did we get to CI? And your clarity of the EOS, which leads to traction, which then leads to the same organization that brought us that, which has been super successful. And one of the outcomes of the COVID kind of be quiet moment for us, right, was that. Also gave us cultural index from our board members and from the people that are in the business world that we really trust. So let's talk a little bit about the depths of it. How do you get into it? Like, what are you going to see when you do this?
You're going to see 2 pages. So I'll start back a step from there as well. If you have not taken this before, you're part of the First Priority world, you've not taken it, email Christina at fpofamerica.com. Tell her who you are, where you are in the First Priority world, and she will have you sent a link from CI. So she'll email that company in our board, and they will email you a link directly from the cultural index. So it'll be a different email. And then you'll just 2 things. It'll be a list of bullet points. You can click as many of them as you want, I believe. And it's who are you? And just to identify yourself. And then you'll get a second page that just is, who are you at work? And what things do you need in order to perform at work? And so, and you'll get those will be the results that you get back as well. Once you take the test, email Christina back, said, hey, I took the test. She'll say, great, I'll go look for it. She'll go through, look for that test on your behalf, and she'll email that over to you. And so you can look a little bit of this stuff up online, but there is not a lot online. This is a business, Fortune 500 kind of thing that they don't publicize it as much as a disc, or it's not as commonly used out there.
Sure.
So it is definitely a management, a people, right seat, right bus, Seth, well, you mentioned Seth Godin, or the leadership gurus out there. It's kind of the stuff that they use. So
yeah, it's excellent.
Yep.
It's excellent.
So once you have yours back, if you've taken it before.
Which I have, by the way.
You have? Yep.
I have my 2 pages, but I don't have it in front of me, but you have yours in front of you. So
I do have mine in front of me. You're going to see some dots on the screen there, and 2 charts. One is yours, and one is yours in work life. Yep. And so red, yellow, blue, green, and they can be shaped any direction. Like, I've even seen them. We have 18 typified patterns, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I've even seen somebody just come with a straight line up and down. And so that's not a typified pattern, right? That's not typical necessarily, but it's just the results that came back. And again, this is just a snapshot of observation. It's the word that I wrote down. It's an observation about you. And again, are you more of a task person or a people person? And it's just your preference. And it's just identifying, based on the answers you gave, what your preferences are at the moment. And so I'm going to jump into these, and we can talk about a little bit more stuff afterwards. Absolutely. At the end. So that first one there at the top, that red dot, is autonomy. Do you have ability to choose? And are you future thinking is your leaning, or are you more preference to tasks and just taking things as they come and just fulfilling that today? So kind of, again, it's a pendulum, right? Okay. It's out there, 1 to 10. Do you prefer to choose and future think and make decisions, or are you more comfortable with the daily tasks and grind of life? Second one is social ability. Again, every one of these profiles has that. Are you more of an introvert, or are you more of an extrovert? Are you more outgoing and animated, or are you more reserved personality in there? So that is on that scale as well. And again, so when we're hiring, when we have people and we want to hire somebody who's a director, and it's your job to be out there raising funds and networking churches, if you're a more reserved personality and that's what you prefer, we don't want you to put you in that role, because you're not going to enjoy Monday morning.
Correct.
So C, the next one down there, is pace. Are you more of an easygoing, not a natural sense of emergency, the steady? I'm an S on the disc profile, so I am more of the easygoing there, because I'm just going to continue to work and I'm going to be there. Loyalist, I'm a loyalist on the Enneagram. So all of those kind of line up together for me to say, hey, yep, I'm that easygoing, not much sense of an urgency until I do kind of a thing, versus somebody who is more animated, more, interrupts more often, always has something to say, and is high, intense personality there. So
hand raised in the room, just so you know. Yeah, hand right here. Yep. High I, high D, just a hot mess. Always interrupts, always thinking about the next answer. Hot mess
is a great word,
right
there.
It's a great word.
Yes, I like that one.
High highs and low lows, whereas you are right there at all times.
Steady.
Right?
Steady.
Yep.
So, and then the last one there is conformity. So are you more leaning towards being correct? Do you like the details to be right? Moralistic is a word that they use in CI. That is where you like to be. Or are you more of a non-conformist? Do you like to think outside the walls again? And they all kind of interrelate a little bit with each other. Like the autonomy is the making decisions for yourself, but the conformity too, it's a little bit different. Where, and they even use the word even irreverent in this, right? So you like to be that person in the church who just likes to push that envelope a little bit and just be out there. Non-conformity, hey, we always sing hymns versus, well, we got to do this latest cutting edge thing all the time, right? But where are you on that scale? And so there are, as we talked about at the training, and we'll talk about it here, 18 typified patterns that we see. And just like the DISC profile, there's kind of 4 buckets. There's 4 DISC. Where's your bucket? I'm a steady in there, but there's a visionary bucket that likes to be more philosopher, enterpriser, architect, trailblazer, daredevil, that kind of a thing.
Which is where I land.
Which is where you land.
As a high DI, I land right there.
Yep.
Keep going.
I'm more in the technical aspect. As a craftsman, I like to build things. I like to think through. I do like to think through things and look forward thinking, making decisions. But which where you and I were with this podcast, right? 2.5 years ago, I called you up on my drive back to South Mississippi, from South Mississippi, and said, hey, it's time. It's time. We need to start this. And I've loved that aspect of this podcast, to build it and to see it happen and to move it forward. But the host position isn't necessarily my strong suit on it. That's not necessarily what I love about this. Being with you is my favorite, but let's not confuse things here.
Funny.
But in the technical, we'll get back to the topic at hand. Technical expert, scholar, specialist, craftsmen are in there. Social people, there's another bucket there. Persuader, rainmaker, debater, socializer. So yeah, we've gotten a lot of people, or several people back, that are debaters. They're the very social people, but they like to debate a lot.
Yep.
And so it's just good to know about you if you are that person. And then we have the organizational bucket. It talks about the administrators, the coordinators, facilitator, operator, traditionalist. Don't confuse first priority coordinator with a CI coordinator.
Yeah.
Just because they use the same word doesn't mean it's the same thing. If
Correct.
you land as coordinator, doesn't mean that, because organizational coordination, which is, again, that's an organizational bucket with a coordinator in there, is different than an area coordinator that needs to go out and network churches and launch clubs, right? And so 2 words there, don't confuse them, but it's, putting our language and their language together. Wanted to make sure that's identified. So that 18 typified patterns is in City Staff Dropbox. You can go take a look at that. You can compare that to your chart, and you can compare it to your work chart, and you'll notice that they can be very different. Most of the time they're not very different, but you can take a look at that. And again, it's observation. It's for your awareness to say, hey, this is where I land, and this is where I'm more comfortable. This may be why I don't like this part of my job, and this is maybe why I do like that part of my job. I've already talked about that with me in the podcast. So,
well, and you can put a technical number on that, right? Because if you're a 5 in sociability, but your work seems to draw you to a 7 in sociability, you're out of your comfort zone.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And so is it an adjustment personally?
Yep.
Is it an adjustment in what you do for the organization?
Yep.
Right? And that could mean that you're not with that organization anymore, or it just could mean that you've got to do something a little bit different, right?
Correct.
But how do you make sure you're within where the levels of comfort are for you, so that you can actually excel at your position?
Yep.
You're not being tested so that you can, quote unquote, fit a box.
Exactly.
Right? You're being analyzed for the sake of yourself.
That's right.
How can I know more about myself so that I can do what I've been asked to do at a better level?
That's right.
And more fruit in our business is a big deal.
That's right.
Because our business is about the gospel and about training students, right? And so knowing thyself and knowing how to execute at a level that you can just means that there are more kids coming to Christ. And more kids coming to Christ means more kids coming to Christ.
That's
right. Skelling.
That's right. That's right. So I'm going to transition back into your chart there. Yeah. Those 4 things are the first thing everybody looks at, but then you'll also know a red line, or notice a red line on your chart. And again, that's on the scale of 1 to 10, and it typically falls just kind of in a kind of a center of where your dots land. So if you're generally that direction, it'll land in there, but that's called your energy units, is what they use that. So how much energy do you have for the task at hand? And specifically when you compare the two, that, hey, I'm a 5 personally. I have an energy level for life at an energy level of 5. But when, and again, it's a little bit of a sliding scale. There's not necessarily a universal thing, where does that mean if you're 10, you're just the most energetic person in the world, and you only need 2 hours of sleep versus, that's kind of ambiguous there. I'm going to say that. But so there's a 5 versus, hey, when I look at my work, I put a 7 in. That means for your perspective, you are putting more energy into your work than you are comfortable with in life. Or vice versa, that, hey, I don't put as much energy into work as I can put into life than I have to live life. And to me, I'll go back to, in a broad generalized sense, each of us individually needs to work through this for ourselves. But generally speaking, either one of those two things can mean that you're either overcompensating because you feel like you need to achieve something, or you're not enjoying your job.
Yeah.
Because for you, you like that people aspect of it. You like going out there. There's a reason you're out in the community all the time. Yep. If we had you next door counting t-shirts, you would have a less energy level than if we have you out there with people. And so that energy level can identify some of those things that, hey, you just might be, we all have things that we need to do in our work that we don't necessarily enjoy.
Exactly right.
But that may be an identifying factor. Again, going back to my word of observation, that may be a good thing for you to observe, to say, okay, that's why I don't like this part of my job.
That's good.
And I just need to deal with it, or I can delegate it, or there are a lot of opportunities to talk through in that, but it's just a good observation to have.
Yep.
So then you'll notice another box underneath with an L and an I on it. The L stands for logic, how sensible argument and thought. So there's a difference between the sensible, rational, logic thought rather than ideas that are influenced solely by emotion or whim. And so there's kind of two polar opposites there, right? Everything is black and white, or everything is emotional. Mm-hmm. And with this one, broadly generalized, I would say the thing to be aware of, well, number one, it's good to be aware of it, but to be not in the extremes. 100%. It's not a, hey, yeah, 10 is the best or 1 is the worst. It's hey, I like to have my awareness and to be aware that, hey, I am a little more emotional than I am sensible, and I hate to say it that way, for logic versus emotion. I'm more of on the logic side of thing than I'm on the emotion side of thing, right? So much so that when you were doing your devotion the other day at the training, I almost let out an amen, but I didn't, because I'm more the logic side than the emotion side.
Amen.
And we'll continue moving on from that, the ingenuity construct. And they very specifically said ingenuity, and they wrote this out in the paragraph. They said, we did not use the word creative or artistic or anything else because we're not talking about sitting at a canvas painting.
Yeah.
How much ingenuity do you have? How much cleverness and originality, imagination is out there for you to say, hey, I can be more literal, or I can be multidimensional in my thinking. Yeah. So when you're multidimensional, you can say, hey, I can see underneath what we're talking about there and go to the next level.
Yep.
Right? And whether that be, that can be art, but it oftentimes is not art, or graphic design or social media, or all the things we often typically think about that. Yep. But hey, we're going to hire myself, and I'm going to go a little deeper in this conversation, and here's what I like and here's what I don't like, and we can sit here and talk about those things and have some ingenuity and creativity and cleverness when we're talking about these things, and be okay with that, and actually think through it all.
And the beauty in the day and age that you and I live in is, and you mentioned his name already, guys like Seth Godin have allowed us to take things that seem very sensible, very logical, very even static. This is the way we do this, right? This is why we do it. And because you are able to use those foundations and turn it into something, it actually is art. Right? It's actually a creative process.
That's right.
I'm being creative in the structure, which is who we are, right? We're a 4-week strategy to share the gospel with students. We're a student-led adult coach. Like, there's all these static things that we are non-negotiables. We call them our distinctives, right? And yet in the midst of those, we see this beautiful creative process, which is the gospel, come out of students. And then students' lives are transformed, which is art. And people's lives are turned upside down, which is art, right? You can just very quickly go down that line. So it's really interesting that we live in a day and age where you go 40 years ago, 30 years ago, you wouldn't get there, right? But right now in the technological, there has to be foundations, there has to be distinctives so that you can be creative world. It really empowers a lot of people.
That's right.
Which is what I feel like about this CI process, is right. It's knowing thyself is meant for empowerment.
That's right. That's right. It's meant to help us put you in the right seat so that you can be the most successful in your life and in the ministry that you are being called to. That's the whole reason why we're doing it. So I'll land the plane in this conversation by saying this. We talked briefly or mentioned spiritual gifts. That's a little bit of a different conversation than a personality test. The gifts of the Spirit that you have, those are there. You have your personality profiles, the introvert, extrovert, all these things that we just talked about. Yep. And then you also have life experience. And so you get into psychology, you talk about the first 17 years of your life, shape you, who you are. You spend the first 20 years of your life doing what you do, and the next 20 years of your life trying to undo what you did, yep. kind of thing, right? Yep. And so those life experiences shape who you are in that personality. The Enneagram gets into that a lot to say, hey, I am a loyalist because of what happened to me the first 17 years of my life, and that's how I responded to what happened to me the first 17 years of my life. But because I'm aware of that doesn't mean I need to stay there anymore. Yep. And I can react differently because I know why I reacted loyally. Most of the time I don't want to not react loyally. I like that, so that's okay, and I can be okay with being there. Yep. But our experiences shape us. So there's a gamut of things. This is just one piece of that we utilize when we're trying to put people into either staff or volunteer positions with first priority.
It's good.
It is good.
And you already said this, but just to reiterate it, if you have not done the CI,
yes.
if you are a current staffer, current coordinator, you're inside the first party world and you mm-hmm. need to, Christina with a K at fpofamerica.com is a great place to start that process. And we would highly encourage you to go through it.
That's right. That's right. And we welcome you to go through it. We want people to know this, have that awareness, and so you can take the hope of Christ to every student, reach as many as possible. And this is a tool that we're using to try to get there.
I like it.
I do too. Well, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, Brad, another good discussion.
It is. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the podcast. As always, if you can give us a 5-star review, share it with those in your network that can benefit from it, and continue to listen on. It is always encouraging to hear people at our training say, hey, yeah, I listen to the show every week, and thanks for doing it. So it's always an encouragement to us to continue on, to not get discouraged, and to get sick of each other.
It's a good word, Brad.
That's right. Well, until next week.
See ya.